Yo, it's Ethan McKinley's Questionable. Hit the music. Ba, 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 ba. Daniele Bolelli.
Hey, Ethan.
How are you, sir? I haven't woken you up too early, have I?
No, it's all good.
Okay, thank you so much for coming on this show, sir. I saw you on Rogan a few months ago, and I thought you were one of the most fascinating people I've ever seen in my life, and the most positive.
Thanks, man.
What time is it where you are?
9:30 in the morning.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you so much for coming on. You are, to the listeners that don't know, I guess you can fill in the extra thumbnail here that I'm about to give on you. Daniele Bolelli, you are known as the Drunken Taoist. You're a professor of religious history, author, martial artist, and presenter of the Drunken Taoist podcast. Or is it Taoist?
It's one of those things. You can pronounce it somewhere in between. It's some people say with a T, some people say with the D. As long as you understand what's being said, it's all good.
Right. Well, the reason you interest me is because you seem to have you seem the most positive person, or one of the most positive people I've ever seen. Kind of like in media, in some sense that you've overcome such like hardships in your life, and you always do it with a wink and a smile, and you seem to have this lovely flow to you.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I make it look easier than it is. That because some days I feel like that. Some days a little bit less.
Well, you've authored 3 books. The first one, of course, is The Warrior's Path, Philosophy, Fighting and Martial Arts Mythology, which you wrote at the age of 22, is that correct?
Yeah.
Wow. My God, I'm the worst underachiever in the world, Daniele. Your second book, 50 Things You're Not Supposed to Know About Religion.
Yeah.
Your third book, Create Your Own Religion. And your fourth book, which is this year's Not Afraid, No Fear, Heartbreak, and Raising a Baby Girl and Cage Fighting. Or doing all 4 at the same time, I assume.
The fourth one is coming out in December.
Which is the fourth one? Is that the Not Afraid one?
Yeah, Not Afraid is coming out in December.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about your life, if you don't mind. I'm sure you've probably been asked this on a million podcasts before.
Well, I mean, basically, let's see, what can I say? I grew up in Italy until I was 18 years old. And then I moved away from Italy around that time, and I came straight to Los Angeles. Been living here ever since, and LA has been kind of a strange place. I mean, some things I really, really like. Initially was difficult because the big cities in the United States are even less community-oriented, less friendly than what I was used to in Italy, and Italy wasn't enough for me that way. So initially I had a bit of culture shock coming out here, but I navigated through it, and eventually I got really comfortable. And I started appreciating the fact that there are things I can do here that I probably couldn't do in Europe at all. The fact that I could start teaching college when I was 27, and I had my hair down my back in a way that you can imagine me teaching for in Italy that way. That would have never happened. So,
yeah, no, well, when I lived in LA, I had the same kind of trouble. I know you've mentioned this previously on other shows you've done, that it's quite a lonely place, isn't it? It's full of all these people, and everyone's trying to step over each other, trying to make it, I guess, because it's an entertainment town. But it's very lonely. If I went out to a bar, or you're trying to arrange to meet people, if something better came along, they'd kind of dump you and go and do that, and it's a very strangely lonely. I mean, when I was there, I used buses quite a lot because I didn't have a driver's license at the time, and weirdly it was the best thing that happened to me because I got to kind of meet people and talk to people and discover the city in that way. But yeah, I do feel your pain. It's a very lonely place in a sense. When did that go away for you? Because I've been there like several times. I've always felt that. Is it something you get when you kind of like you've lived there for a while, or you've got the flow?
I think what it is this is a lonely place because people are constantly crazy busy, which obviously is a bit of a psychopathology in itself, because, I don't care how busy you are, you can still make time for other human beings sometimes, but that's the way it goes. The emphasis here on get stuff done, work, make things happen. I think when I abandoned my notion of how things should be, and I decided that, okay, well, let's focus on what I can actually do in this place, not what it's very difficult to get done.
Sure.
Started focusing a bit more on myself, I started getting a lot more intense in my martial arts practice. I started focusing more about writing, started, building at least, if I couldn't change things on a bigger level, at least build something in the more immediate environment that I had control on.
Sure.
I think that made things considerably more pleasant.
Well, when did you move here? Because, I mean, you wrote your first book at the age of 22, right? And that came out in 2003. Is that correct? Or was that a reprint?
Well, that was a reprint. Originally was 1996 in Italy. I mean, that book has kind of a long genesis because it was 1996 in Italy and it was about 8 chapters.
Sure.
Then I finally, when my English became decent enough, I could translate it into US and was published in 2003 with 3 additional chapters, so it was 11 chapters. And then they did a reprint in 2008 with 2 extra chapters, so compared to the fairly thin book that it was in 1996, the 2008 version is probably about twice as long.
Well, how do you fit into the academic environment that you obviously work in? I mean, you seem like a man of all seasons in a sense. You're a martial arts black belt, is that correct? You're an author, of course, but you seem kind of very rock and roll. I guess in those rigid systems, particularly the educational ones, where there's a very party line of how to think, and there's a very lefty liberal side, and there's the people who think other ways and stuff. Do you how do you fall into this? Do you put noses out of joint? Do you upset a lot of the professors there or students?
I mean, no, students are great. Students, and I get along with students perfectly. I rarely ever have had a problem.
Sure.
Professors, other people, I mean, there are some nice people. Overall, the academic environment is one that makes me throw up. It's just terrible from so many points of views because it's, for one, it's dry. It's just really the most unexciting thing I can think of. There are lots of things that, I think about, one of the fields that I teach in history.
Sure.
And when I listen to a lot of academic history, they manage to take some potentially really exciting subjects and just suck up all the fun out of it and deliver some really dry, painful things that turn everybody off, essentially. When you tell the exact same stories but with a little bit of flair, people get intrigued because they are powerful. But somehow academia is very bureaucratic, very stuck up, So I'm not exactly at home there, but I guess, at least here in California, there's somewhat more leeway to be able to do your thing without being bound quite by the same rules.
Sure.
So, am I at home in it? No. But did I carve for myself a niche in which I'm able to do my thing relatively unmolested? Yes.
Okay. Did that take a long time to achieve, though, in terms of maybe jealousy from other professors or the academic body at large? Have you been at the same place teaching for that many years, or have you moved around?
Yeah, no, I've taught a few places. I keep teaching in a few places. I think what it is as long as you are sort of the lowly part-timer who teach a bunch of courses, but who's not that much part of the inner circle, then you're okay.
Sure.
But if you try to get into a more permanent position, then they scrutinize you a bit more and they just, of course, hate you for it.
Yeah, because I mean, does it help having your own podcast, of course, the Drunken Taoist, which I recommend people to listen to? It's fantastic. Does that kind of put you up or down in their eyes?
No, definitely put you down.
But not in student terms, they like that, right? It's an access point, I guess, to the teacher, right? I'm sure people come and study at the school just to meet you or work with you, right?
Yes, anything that makes you more liked by students is the stuff that makes you more disliked by your colleagues, as a general.
Oh, we've just lost your camera, by the way, Daniele, I think.
I'm sorry, say that again?
We've just lost your camera, I think.
I turned it off just because I figured that it's the audio quality usually improves. If you want, I can bring it back up.
No, it's fine. It's whichever way you want to do it, sir. We do both, but I can just do audio. That's fine.
Oh, because you usually do video? Oh, sorry. I can bring up the video. No problem.
No, you don't have to.
No problem. Basically what happened with also with the podcasting, I just started a week ago. Well, I started 2 years ago, but I finally got it released a week ago. I got a new podcast out.
Yeah, History on Fire.
History on Fire, exactly. And that's another thing that I'm sure is gonna, if they pay any attention, it's just gonna make them hate me more. Because it's going to be fucking popularizer, this is not what we do, this is what, do you think you're some kind of pop star, screw you, there's gonna be all that jealousy that anything that makes you reach out to a world that's wider
Sure.
than their tiny little bit academic circles usually is a bad thing. Now, this is obviously not everybody. There are clearly some very nice people working in academia. There are some nice people who would be excited about stuff like this. There are people who have, so I'm not saying it's everyone is like this, because that's obviously not the case, but it's widespread enough as to be noticeable.
Sure. Wow. I mean, how have you found it as a podcaster? You're 2 years in now. I'm like on my own about 4 months. I don't know. I always go back to the YouTube channel. I'm always checking the stats, see how well things are doing, trying to get this, trying to get that. And it becomes an obsession of sorts in a way. But then you have to kind of like wring that out of yourself like a rag and get rid of the dirty water, because I think it clogs a lot of your. It becomes more about how many people are watching it as opposed to the content, or you know how you feel about it. It should be a journey, I think. Have you found that too? Like the checking of your stats and how popular am I and stuff, and like bringing ego into it in a sense.
Yeah, it's an ego trap after a while that it's normal to fall into, but it still is an ego trap. You know, it's like what, because you can pat yourself on the back if you have 50,000 listeners, but if you have 1,000, you're a failure. I mean, it's bullshit. You know, it's like if you put out quality work, if you're doing a good thing that you're happy with, that's the beginning at the end of it.
Yeah,
you know, there's just no. So as natural and understandable as it is to play the numbers game, there's never a point where you can say, now I'm so happy with myself, because there's always going to be the guy who's getting greater ratings, who has a lot more people, and start playing the game of like, why am I not there? Why didn't it's like, so it's a healthy thing to limit that as much as possible.
Yeah, no, of course.
Can you still hear me?
I can, yeah. Yeah, we'll leave out the camera, I think, because the audio is kind of like failing. We keep having these like speed ups and catch ups. So what are your is it a doctorate you have?
No, I did 2 masters. So I did one in American Indian Studies and one in history.
Sure.
I started trying to, not because I wanted to, but because it seemed like a smart thing to do for future career prospect. I tried to do a PhD, and eventually about halfway through I said, forget it. I just can, if I have to spend one more day thinking like that, I'm just gonna shoot myself, because it's I don't know, it's really just not my way of thinking. It's not my way of expressing myself. It's not my way, like so I decided, you know what, I'm gonna teach my classes part-time. I'm having fun with that. I'm gonna focus more on writing and podcasting. That's more who I am.
Sure. No, of course. So are you a religious person? Are you an atheist or a believer in any particular religion, or do you find them all a bit of a kind of like a sham of sorts?
I mean, it's complicated.
Yeah, because I'm not an atheist, but I'm also not a believer in anything. I think there's probably something beyond what we know, but it's something so indescribable. I mean, I've had a few psychedelic experiences, and I guess that might be a kind of snapshot of the tip of the iceberg, maybe, but I think apart from that, no.
That's exactly my thing. It's I don't have a strict materialist viewpoint where I believe that only what can be observed right in front of me right now is real. I've had experienced too many things that suggest that the world is way more complex and more complicated than a strictly scientific materialist viewpoint would hold.
Sure.
At the same time, I find that most religions are too desperate to fill in the blanks with some answers, even when no rational answers are in sight.
Yeah.
So I do think that there's, you know, what we actually know about the universe is a tiny fraction of what's out there. But I'm not rushing to fill in with explanations, because I feel that our understanding, our human brain can capture such a limited amount that trying to conjecture too much is kind of bound to screw up. It's not gonna, you know, that's the part that I have against the various, some of the various organized religions, is too much emphasis on telling you exactly how everything works, when in reality we don't know how everything works. Which doesn't mean there's nothing beyond the material, but it doesn't mean that I have to take your prepackaged answer either. So I tend to like better religious ideas when they focus on things that you can do in the here and now, how to behave, how to relate to other human beings, how to do something that can increase the quality of life right here, right now. That stuff interests me. The more theological part about how the universe works and this and that, I feel like that gives me a little more the feeling of fairy tales.
Well, I think the flip side of that, of course, is like Richard Dawkins, who believes in literally nothing. And I mean, he's very fun to watch. And I love the kind of like back and forth debates he has with like hyper religious or fanatically religious people. But I think he maybe hasn't had a psychedelic experience, or do you know what I mean? It's kind of a...
Yeah, I mean, some of the more... To me, it's funny when I see a fundamentalist mindset among people who are super scientific.
Yeah.
And it's funny because they hate fundamentalists, as in religious fundamentalists, and not realize that sometimes their way of thinking is really not that far removed. Because it's still that way that say, I have the answers, I own the truth, I know what's right and wrong in every possible way, and I'm right, you're wrong, which is exactly what fundamentalists do.
Sure.
You know, science should be this awesome tool that allow you to kind of slowly get some ideas about what's out there and figure out, separate superstition from facts. But the reality is that the human element kicks in, and so many people heavily involved with science, and are playing the same game. So to me, when I'm talking to somebody who's a hardcore scientist or who is a religious fundamentalist, sometimes I can't really tell the difference. Yeah. I feel that I'm talking to the same people who just happen to have had different life experiences, but the mindset, I don't find it all that different.
Well, it's similar to a church. I guess you see the same things as we discussed in academic institutions where, you know, no one would dare step out of the norm and go, well, I think this, because you'll be slapped down immediately or ostracized in some form or fashion.
Yep.
Yeah, it's... do you think there'll be an end to religion? I think now we've got the internet and everyone's kind of, I hope, a bit open-minded in terms of how we think and how we see things. And as science kind of like shines a light, especially with the internet, where people can communicate freely and instantly. Do you think religion's maybe got 100 or 200 years left in it? I read that somewhere. I was just curious as to what you thought.
No, I think it's less. I mean, really the issue is there meaning in the universe? Is there any logic in the universe? Is there anything that happens before and after death? Those are the big things that everybody wants to know the answer to and nobody does. So until some good answers can come up to those questions, and I don't see that happening anytime soon, then there's going to be a place for religions.
Yeah. Well, I just thought, because I mean, I guess if you went back to the Salem witch hunts when everyone was like fanatically religious, or like certain parts of the world even now, I don't know, I've just got this weird feeling that within like maybe 100 or 200 years, when everyone's got the internet, everyone's technologically advanced, everyone's perhaps, as we get more into like transhumanism and everyone starts altering their body either genetically or physically, there's this merge of perhaps man and machine on some small level. I don't know how that would continue on, maybe, I don't know. I mean, like, if you take religion now versus the way religion was 200 years ago in, I guess, in America and in England, where we are now, where I am now.
Yeah.
We just seem, we're not as religious, are we? We like people work on a Sunday now and stuff like that. It just, I don't know.
No, that for sure. That, you know, changing, no doubt. But going away, again, unless the fear of death goes away, religion is not going away. Because people need something to make them feel better about the fact that we have no idea what happens to us for eternity.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's it's an eternal question we'll never get the answer to. I mean, you did a recent show with Amber Lyon, and I think you did one with Aubrey Marcus a while back, and they've obviously had an ayahuasca experience and have been forever changed in a sense. Amber Lyon seems ultra spiritual. Every other word she seems to say is spiritual or universal, or there's this kind of synchronicity to things, and if things are meant to happen, they happen, and stuff like that. How do you sit with that? And then have you ever had any experiences like that since? Have you been inspired by them to try it, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, how can I put it?
Because I think Duncan Trussell's gone down to Brazil, hasn't he, and had his experience.
He's planning to, he didn't.
Oh, he didn't go?
No, he didn't go.
Oh. Damn.
Let's see. I guess what it is I don't have the experience and I don't have the belief that everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. I I did try to deal with some kind of heavy stuff I was dealing with. On Amber's suggestion, I did try to go a more psychedelic route and try sort of therapy connected with mushrooms.
Sure.
And let's say my experience was not exactly the Amber Lion Aubrey Marcos experience.
Sure.
I got my ass kicked brutally. It was probably the worst 8 hours of my life.
Yeah.
And
no, I've had those. Don't worry, Daniele. You're not.
But you know, you usually hear the whole psychedelic of kind of, you go through hell, you spend your 2 hours facing all your fears, and you come out on the other side reborn, lighter, happier, and everything is great. My thing was more, I did 8 hours of hell, and then I dug deeper and deeper and deeper in deeper layers of hell, and then it was over.
Sure.
And I'm like, what happened to the other side of the arc when you come out all feeling better and life is great and all of that? And you know, that just did not quite pan out.
Well, is there no positive side to be taken from that? Because I think people would argue when you have I guess you'd call it a bad trip, it's because there's certain things that you've not attended to, or you've buried, or you're not willing to face. I mean, I've had experiences like that myself. And
well,
I always
that was the whole point of doing it, is I know I have these issues and I'm trying to deal with that. So
yeah.
we are already on the, I know they are there and I'm trying to solve it. And not only was no solution, like not only did I not lessen my degree of PTSD, but if anything, I added a layer of mushroom PTSD where I spent 2 weeks afterwards waking up in the middle of the night going, oh, I can feel the ground under me kind of thing. Yeah. So it's like I didn't need to notice that I had issues. That's why I was doing it, is because I had issues, you know?
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, no, it's, I mean, I've had those similar experiences myself, but it's kind of seems to be a very big thing to do. You know, everyone's going off to, I guess, to do these ayahuasca circles, and I've got friends that have tried smoke DMT and stuff, but I think if you're aware of what you need to take care of in your own life, it's a redundant experience. I mean, I've kind of felt that as well. You've come out of these experiences and gone, well, those problems are still there, and I know what they are, and I still need to kind of like address them in a sense. Yeah. So we're still at the base of the mountain, and the best way to do it is practically just put boots on the ground and start climbing.
Yeah, I was hoping that the psychedelic experience itself would be boots on the ground and kind of try to address them in a way that I couldn't address them in a rational state, just to address them in a way to kind of turn some corners, which it seems to be what happened with Amber. It seems what happens with a lot of people. It definitely was not what happened with me.
Well, I mean, I would argue maybe because you are a philosopher and a teacher of philosophy, and you've had that in your life for many, many years, you're constantly having those like existential questions and questioning yourself, right? So therefore, I guess somebody who's worked a regular job and hasn't kind of addressed these thoughts or these lofty notions, and then suddenly has this experience, it becomes, I guess, transcendent and almost religious in a sense. Whereas I guess you kind of, you have that mindset from obviously your work and your books and things, and thinking that way. So therefore, it's not needed in a sense. Would you say?
I don't know, because I mean, ultimately, it's not just about thinking. It's also about it's about turning some corners on a very practical level and levels of consciousness. And yes, while I may not have quite the same wow effect just because I've had a lot of experiences in that direction, not purely from books, but just from life experience as well.
Sure.
It still is some of the experiences that some of the people that I've had on podcast had sound awesome, and I'm glad for them. I'm a little bummed out that road really didn't quite work for me, and it not only didn't quite work, because you can always try again, but it was such a kick to the groin that it really didn't want to make me try much more.
Sure.
I mean, I've had pleasant experiences with mushroom on much milder dose that were also not life-changing. They were, you know, unlike the horrible one, they were very pleasant one, but it was, you know, fun, look at the cute colors, look at the visuals, you know, fun stuff, but it's really not all that different from being gloriously buzzed. You know, it wasn't like, oh, wow, now I'm understanding more about life and the universe.
Sure.
Now, I'm not in any way saying that the experiences that everyone seems to have had on psychedelics are not real or valid or amazing. I'm just saying, for me, it hasn't quite panned out that way. And, I wish it did, but it hasn't.
Damn. Well, can we discuss some of your books briefly? I'd like to move on to 50 Things You're Not Supposed to Know About Religion. What are we not supposed to know?
Well, actually, that book was a book that I was not going to write. It wasn't my idea. What happened was I had written On the Warrior's Path. I had written most of Create Your Own Religion. I was pitching Create Your Own Religion. And the publisher that was interested in chatting with me about this was saying, that's great and all, but we have this series called 50 Things You're Not Supposed to Know. It would be great if you do one about religion. And, I was, at that time, at first I thought, like, what the hell? I wrote this book where I pour my heart and soul in Create Your Own Religion. It's sort of the sum of so much of my thinking, my philosophy, and you're asking me to do write as a funny, quick 50 things.
Sure.
I was like, okay, that doesn't seem, but I decided to do it.
People like lists, don't they? It's it's like the old George Carlin bit about the 10 Commandments. 10 sounds official. People gravitate and love lists.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually really glad I did it, because what happened was, came at a really shitty period of my life when all of a sudden having something that I had to do and having to do something actually kind of light-hearted and funny was probably excellent therapy for me.
Sure.
So it was great from that point of view. It was great because it's what allowed me to end up as a guest on a bunch of podcasts, from Joe Rogan to Adam Carolla and so on and so forth, which then opened the doors to so many other things.
Yeah.
I still ended up doing Create Your Own Religion later. And 50 Things was great because I had zero time to write it. And it forced me to realize that the quality of my writing doesn't really decline all that much if I have to do it with extremely limited time. I used to just sit there and spend the whole day to write my 2 pages, and then if I had an hour, I would still write my 2 pages with the same quality. So I realized, okay, I'm just bitching around forever when I write, and instead I can actually get it done in a much more efficient fashion.
Sure.
It was good. It was overall a very good experience.
Mm. Well, what was the thrust of the book? I mean, I'm sorry, I've not read your books yet, because I found you literally through podcasting, which I guess you've just mentioned is what this book got you to that stage, which I guess brought you to a wider audience, me included. So this and Create Your Own Religion, do you have a beef with religion, or is it what's the angle?
Well, I guess the 50 Things was really just about, let's come up with some crazy, wild, hilarious stories about religion. And it's more of in that sense, it's more for entertainment than anything. I enjoy deeply the way I got to write it, style-wise. I would crack up researching this story and then putting them in a language that would fit that. But that's where it was. The other one, Create Your Own Religion, is sort of take all the big questions that every human being should try to tackle at some point in life about, relationship with one's body, relationship with the earth, gender roles, attitudes towards sex, all the things that all the different religions provide answers to.
Sure.
And the idea was to kind of look at what some of the answers that are out there, the various religions provide, and on a very personal level decide what seems healthy, what seems unhealthy, embrace one, reject the other, and then kind of mix what seemed to make sense to you. In a way to, at the end of the day, come up so that if I believe certain things, I don't believe them because that's all I've ever exposed to. It's like the only religion that I was brought up in was these are the answers they gave me, and magically they are the answers that are perfect to answer all of those questions. It's more like, let's see what all the answers out there are, see if there are any of them at all that are satisfying to you. If there are, great. If there aren't, what answers would be satisfying to you, and come up with those.
Sure.
So that whatever worldview you decide to embrace is truly your own. It's not just some prepackaged thing that you bought into because you don't know any better. It's something that you decided to do because you actually have done your homework, and you pick a certain answer because actually it doesn't seem like the best answer available.
Sure. Did you interview many people for the book or books?
No. This is a lot, there's a bunch of research, and then it's mainly research driven and my thing.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking, like, now, of course, in the climate we're in, you've got a lot of religious extremism and all these crazy things happening, beheadings, people being thrown off roofs for being gay and stuff. I'm just thinking there must be a human part of all the people doing that somewhere, no? That thinks this is kind of wrong, or are they just caught up in the...
No, I think when you start believing that, and that to me is one of the biggest questions that I was tackling in the book, one of the biggest religious issues, or for the matter even non-religious, on a philosophical level, is deciding whether you embrace an exclusive viewpoint that believes that there's only one truth in life,
Sure.
and that's it, or if you embrace an inclusive one that believes that there may be more than one way that's satisfying and acceptable. Now, the exclusive viewpoint taken to the extreme usually breeds fanaticism. And it's the same thing whether it's Islamic fanaticism, whether it's Christian fanaticism, Jewish fanaticism, whether it's no religious at all, whether you're looking at communist Russia, for example, at the time.
Sure.
It's the same mentality. There's only one right way, ours. Anybody else's viewpoint need to be squashed because they are interfering with the spreading of the truth to everybody.
Yeah. I don't know, I think when you ever see these extremists, there must be like two guys out of the group going, oh God, this is all horseshit, but I'm kind of involved and I don't know what to do and they'll kill me if I don't do it. I don't know. I went to drama school, Daniele, and I think sometimes in those classes, maybe you get them in philosophy classes, when there's always someone in the room who felt it more than you, or even a yoga class, we connected with it more than you did, and we're this and we're that, and they become these kind of like poison pills, if you will, that kind of make you go, oh God, what am I doing in this group of people? I'm often given pause when I see all these acts of like utter like psychotic evil and violence. Do the people who are executing those orders believe to their very core that this is the right thing to do, or are they just violent people using this as a catalyst to kind of continue being psychotic and violent, if you will?
I think all of the above apply. There's going to be who don't believe it but got caught in. There are people who believe it 100%. There are people who are just being who they are and they use their ideology as an excuse. I think all of the above apply.
Yeah. No, it's madness. I don't know. I'm not sure how it will fit into the world at large as we move forward. This is why I think religion may not last, because I think when it gets this bad, at some point when everyone's connected with technology, like communications wise, they must go, hang on, we've had enough of this. I guess in the sense that if you're in Africa, you've got an African warlord, they can accuse someone of being a witch and they'll just kill them and eat them, or or execute them. Whereas in obviously LA or here in London, someone will go, hang on, no they're not, what are you talking about? Do you know what does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, clearly there's a way to make things easier and more pleasant. And it does happen, and clearly the face of religion in much of the Western world has changed for the better over time. But A, I don't think it's ever fully gone, and B, I think the ghost of that stuff is always there at the edge. Like the possibility to revert to heavy fanaticism is always under the surface.
Sure.
Because it's a human tendency. I mean, people have done it under different flags, but all throughout history.
Sure.
Think about all the forms of religious fundamentalism. Think about all the forms of political fundamentalism. Again, just even if you look at the secular stuff, well, the Nazis were kind of religious, kind of secular, but definitely that applies. Communism is fully secular, and yet you see the amount of the same exact mentality that characterized religious fundamentalism has been there in Soviet Union, in so many of the communist regime. So to me, it's just a human desire to want certainties and to want to become so fanatical about those certainties that you want to impose them on everybody.
Sure. Well, can we move on to your book that's out this year, actually, Not Afraid, on fear, heartbreak and raising a baby girl and cage fighting. Now, for those that don't know, I'm sure everyone that's listening to this will have heard of you, but a student of many martial arts. Are you a black belt in many of those?
I'm a black belt in one martial arts. I've trained in a whole bunch. I did for a good chunk of my life, probably from the time I was about 17 to 35, 36, 37, something like that, probably 35.
What came first, the fighting or the philosophy, or was it a mix of both?
It started out in a very romanticized, philosophical kind of way, and then it progressively I became more and more of a barbarian as time went by. And I was enough talking already. Let's start fighting. I'm bored. It's like I get to talk and here's point of view all day long. Now when I'm in martial art class, shut up already and let's just start sweating and throw down. And so yeah, I trained for a really long period of my life. Then the last 5, 6 years of my life have been very complicated, to say the least. So my training has, I mean, I still train, but hasn't been what it used to be. And but you know, to me, at the end of the day, as much as fun as martial art practice is, it's also what's really important about it is not the martial art practice for the sake of martial art practice, is the stuff that it can teach you about the rest of life.
Sure.
On how it changes your personality and your attitude in a way that how you handle the rest of life, which is to some degree what this book is about.
Sure.
You know, is a lot of the book is about tackling fear in martial arts, but then is after going through that section, the rest of the book is really about tackling fear when life sort of hit me the hardest, how some of the things I learned from martial arts actually get to play out in real life, which ultimately is a lot more important than what happens in the ring or on the mat.
Sure. How's it been as a single father with all this storm happening around you at the time, and I guess to some degree now? How's it been kind of raising a young girl? Because I listened to your podcast recently. You watched Conan the Barbarian together, right?
Yeah. She loves Conan the Barbarian. It's funny because she can be really tough and ready to throw down on one level, and on the other level she's super sweet and mellow and just has a really good heart, and she's very, you know, she has a lot of empathy, and so it's a perfect Tao right there. There's a lot of very yin yang. But for me, you know, I mean, I've been fighting a lot of my fears, a lot of my concerns, a lot of the traumatic things that happened that I've left scarring me, and I still am. You know, it's not like I've done it once and it was done and over with. It's still an ongoing battle. Some days it goes a whole lot better than others. Some days, you know, I feel that I can ride above it all. Other days, it just, you feel this heaviness trying to drag you down. And it's the same battle over and over again. And I think that's life. I think that's just how the game goes. And, you know, my hope is that as I get better and better at handling it, my wins become more than my losses.
Sure.
There are more of the days when I'm like, phew, that thing was potentially getting ready to drag me down, and I found a way around it.
Who are your heroes, Daniele?
Heroes.
Have you got anyone that you well, as growing up and even now, as someone who you like as a template maybe for your life, or?
Sure. Let's go in, you know, without people that are in my immediate life. That's too easy and too sort of personal in a way where it's not.
No, of course, yeah.
Not up to other people. But on a bigger scale, I would say one of my all-time idols is this Zen guy from the 1400s named Ikkyu Sojun. He's absolutely hilarious because he's a guy whose life was basically based on, his main interests were Zen Buddhism, women, and alcohol. That's what it was all about. And one of the things that
I think that's what most people are about, even in this century, Daniele.
Well, that's what I think is like. What cracked me up about him is that he faced a lot of really harsh things, but always rose in a way that, like, his whole attitude. There's a beautiful quote attributed to him that says, "Even if I end up in hell, I'm gonna find a way to enjoy it."
Sure.
You know, and I love that attitude that you're not denying the fact that there's a lot in life that you have no control over, and stuff will happen that you have zero control over, and, you know, you can't avoid it. The only thing that you can have some control over is figuring out how to tackle your reaction to it, figure out how to carve for yourself a way to find the joy even in the shittiest situations.
Is that what you're trying to convey with that picture of yourself? Well, people, if they're watching this on YouTube, there'll be a lovely picture of you holding a stack of books with a black eye and an MMA glove, giving, I guess, the person looking at you the finger. Is
that's more about duality, let's put it that way. It's more about the nerdy intellectual side with screw you, ready to fight side.
Yeah, I can kick your ass.
Still connected with middle fingers. There is a pic that I took when my daughter was really young, right after my wife had died, like maybe 3 months later or something, where I'm holding my daughter, and on one end there's this very sweet thing where you're kind of holding each other, this baby in my arms, and on the other I have my middle finger out. There's sort of this, the universe has...
Give me your best shot, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the universe has tried to crush me. Not that I personalize the universe, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no.
Life has tried to crush me. I'm still here, and sort of there's this defiant moment of screw you to all those forces that are trying to bring you down, and at the same time holding on and embracing something that it's sweet, something that's beautiful, something that, it's not just about going to become harsh and cynical and go through life that way. That is about finding beauty in day-to-day life, despite all the horror and heaviness of it all.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit like Rudyard Kipling's poem What It Is to Be a Man.
Right, yeah. right. Which is...
If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and that kind of stuff.
Yep, yeah. It's a complicated dance, to say the least.
And to a lesser degree, Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump.
Right.
Well, Daniele, before we wrap up, I'm just going to mention to people you've got the Drunken Taoist podcast, which is, you've had some brilliant people on there. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And then we'll talk about your history podcast, which you're launching, I guess. You've got one episode out, is that correct?
Yeah.
What's the thrust behind the Drunken Taoist?
Drunken Taoist was, I was a guest on so many podcasts for a good year, and people kept asking me, start your own, and I was sort of lazy about it, because I'm like, man, I'm busy as hell, I have zero time, I don't want to learn about the whole gig on how to edit it, how to put it together, so I was trying to avoid it, and during one of my excuse-making moments, I just said, sure, if somebody can hook me up with some of those things, because I don't have the physical time to sit down and learn right now.
Yeah.
Very quickly, there was somebody, Retrievers, who emailed me saying, hey, I have access to the studio in Culver City. I'm a film editor. I can take care of that part. Evan Culver, who jumped in and said, yeah, this web is, I can take care of all your... I was like, oh, shit, I guess we're doing a podcast then.
Yeah.
So we started up, and the whole point of the Drunken Taoist is not to have a single theme. It's, I'm going to talk one day to a New York Times bestseller, one day to a porn star, one day to a, you name it. It's just all over the place. It ranges from sex to philosophy to religion to sports to the whole gamut of human experience. To me, anywhere where there's passion, where there's intensity, it interests me.
Sure.
If there is no passion or intensity, it doesn't, regardless of which topic we're tackling. I do 2 episodes a month, one with a guest, one without, where it's just me and Retrievers going off.
Sure.
And it's been 3 years now. We've had fun with it, good times.
No, it's a fantastic show. I mean, you and your co-host, you've got a really nice juxtaposition, and then you bring the third person in, and it's there's a nice up and down flow to it. It's great. There's a great quality to the show. I can't recommend it highly enough to the listeners. And that's kind of what hooked me into you, because I thought you were great on the Rogan show and stuff, and I've heard you on Duncan Trussell. He was actually one of the people that helped midwife my show into existence, because I reached out to a bunch of people on podcasting, and no one replied. And the only person within 2 days who got back to me weirdly, who we didn't know, me of course, was Duncan.
No way. You got seriously lucky, because Duncan sometimes replies, sometimes doesn't.
Yeah.
So you got lucky.
He said you need...
Duncan, this guy.
Yeah, he said you need this, and this. Get this mic. Try this. Now do that. And
that's awesome.
Yeah. Then a year in, I kind of had an equipment failure, and he helped me with that. So Duncan weirdly has been the strange guardian angel of this podcast. But
that's awesome.
It has.
There's no argument that he's one of the sweetest guys you're gonna run into.
No, it's I can't say enough good stuff about him. He really has been a great help. Not a friend as such, because he doesn't know me from Adam. But every time I've shot him an email with a problem with my show, technically or philosophically, if you will, he's always been great. He's always replied almost immediately. So I was very lucky.
That's really good. No, that's wonderful.
So History on Fire, Daniele. Just before we put a pin in this, this is your new podcast. It's you've got 1 or 2 episodes out. I think it's 1 episode, right?
Yeah, I did an episode 0 that's only 15 minutes. That's just an intro and then an actual episode out there. And it's going crazy good right now. It's like shot up on iTunes. It's like in the top 40 podcasts in the world.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting. It's exciting. It makes sense in a way. I mean, it's sort of silly even that I didn't do it sooner, because it's I teach history and I do podcasting, and I deeply admire Dan Carlin's hardcore history, the way he weaves history in a podcast format.
Yeah, The Wrath of the Khans is really good, if you've heard that one about Genghis Khan.
Yeah, of course. No, I listen to his stuff because it's brilliant. And so it didn't take a genius to put two and two together and say, okay, if you teach history and you do podcasting and you enjoy it, why not do a historical podcast? Even because I think that's why I like Dan Carlin, is because I recognize the same flavor, the same taste. That's sort of the way I lecture anyway. So to me, it was like, okay, well, let's do this. Even because realistically, the Drunken Taoist is something that you're going to listen if you have heard of me and you like me, but that obviously is a relatively small audience to begin with. Whereas something like History on Fire, you don't need to know anything about me. You dig history and you decide to give it a shot, and then you get to find out whether you like it or not. So potentially it reaches a much bigger audience because it's easy to categorize, it's easier to make it fit somewhere.
Well, it's a good title as well, isn't it? History on Fire. It jumps out at you, and of course it's got history first and foremost in the title, and of course people will latch into that. So it's going to be great.
And the artist Savannah M designed a really badass logo for it. Like there's this image of me with books in one hand, a katana in another, in front of the Coliseum on fire behind me. So it's an awesome image. She did a great job with it.
Well, that for the listeners, that's actually linked with the artwork for both of your wonderful shows on the webpage of Questionable.
Yeah.
And I just want to say thank you so much, Daniele. I've reached out to a bunch of people this week, and they've all kind of come at me at the same time. So my only panic now is to kind of fit in Graham Hancock, Alex Winter from Bill and Ted, and Adam Scorgi, and you, of course. So I really can't thank you enough for returning the call and getting back and coming on the show. I'm like properly, I think, 20 shows in now, and it's really going fantastically well. The next thing I need to do is essentially get a sponsor, but I just know how to do that. So mate, I'm going to reach out to Duncan.
That's the messy process. But yeah, just please say hi to Graham and Adam. I had both of them on my show. They are very cool people.
Yeah.
And they should be in for some good conversations.
Well, if I'm ever in Los Angeles or you're ever in London, I mean, let me know, look me up, and I mean, hopefully we can do another one of these shows again, because you've got such an expansive experience of philosophy and life and love and sex and fighting, and the human scope of all emotions and and outlooks. You're one of the most interesting people I've heard on podcasting recently, so it's an honor to speak to you, sir, and thank you. I do hope we can get you on again.
Thanks so much. Sound great.
Okay, brother. Daniele Bolelli, you wonderful man. You can find him at thedrunkentaoist.com. You can find his new podcast, History on Fire, which is on iTunes. Is that right, Daniele?
Yeah, it's all over, the usual ways people download, Stitcher, iTunes, the whole deal.
Yeah. And I'll put all links under the show title under the video on YouTube. You can find it on the links at the website, guys. If you want to donate to this show in Bitcoin, you can. You just scan the code at the top of the picture. And thank you all for listening. And Daniele, you beautiful man, you. Thank you so much for coming on. I love you. Thank you. Let's do this again soon, and have a lovely rest of your day. And thank you so much for doing this so early in the morning as well.
Of course. Thanks, man. You too.
You brought the fire, and I'm going to look forward to History on Fire. I'm going to listen to the first episode after this. But yeah, man, you're great. I love you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll speak to you soon.